I saved my fiance from an accident and became crippled just because of her. She abandoned me right after at the hospital. My name is Bright Morgan, and this is the story of how love, sacrifice, and betrayal shaped my life. Please kindly take a moment and subscribe to this YouTube channel. I had always thought Lucy Dawson was my forever. We met in college when life felt like a wide open field, and we believed youth meant endless possibilities. She was charming, fiery, and full of laughter. When she smiled, the world bent in her direction, and I was only too happy to follow. I believed that protecting her, cherishing her, would be my greatest role. It was a late autumn afternoon when it happened. The skies were pale gray, and the air smelled of gasoline and dry leaves. We had been walking back from a cafe where Lucy had teased me about ordering black coffee, like an old man. My hands were in my pockets, hers curled around her phone, distracted by messages as always. The street was busy. Cars rushed past. A truck braked hard, skidding slightly on the slick road. That was when I saw it, the sedan lurching too fast, tires squealing, heading straight toward Lucy. Instinct swallowed thought. I shouted her name, but she froze like a deer caught in headlights. So I did the only thing I could. I lunged. I shoved Lucy with every ounce of strength in me. She tumbled sideways onto the pavement, wide-eyed, gasping. But before I could move out of the way, the sedan struck me. The sound was sickening, metal against bone. The rush of air knocked from my chest. Pain exploded white-hot in my legs. Then blackness swallowed me whole. When I woke up in a hospital, the sterile smell burned my nostrils and the hum of machines filled the room. My legs were heavy, foreign. A doctor with kind but tired eyes explained the truth. My spine had taken the brunt of the impact. I would not walk again, not like before. Crippled. That word echoed through my skull, shattering everything I thought I knew of myself. Lucy was there at first. She sat by the bed, her face pale, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "You saved me," she whispered, as though she couldn't believe it. And for a brief moment, I felt peace. Because yes, at least she was alive. But peace doesn't last when pain becomes your new language. Days blurred into weeks. My body screamed in rebellion every time nurses shifted me. Nights were long, filled with the quiet tears I wouldn't let my mother or Lucy see. Madeline, my mother, sat at my bedside day after day, her small hands wrapping around mine with steady warmth. She was aging, her hair more silver than brown now, but her strength humbled me. Lucy, on the other hand, began to change. She grew restless, fidgeting, eyes darting more to her phone than to me. She spoke less, stayed shorter amounts of time. I told myself she was overwhelmed, maybe traumatized by the accident too. But the truth was harder, sharper. She had always been drawn to life's brightness, to freedom and beauty. And my wheelchair reminded her of limits. One evening, I woke from a nap and realized she wasn't there. Madeline sat knitting by the window, the orange sunset flooding the room. "Lucy stepped out," she said gently. But she didn't come back that night. Or the next. When she finally did, her words were clipped, rehearsed. "Bright, I can't do this. I didn't sign up for this kind of life. I love you, but not like this. Not anymore." I remember staring at her, trying to find the girl who had once laughed with me under college dorm lights, the girl I had thrown myself in front of a car for. But she was gone. "I almost died for you," I whispered, my voice hoarse, raw with disbelief. Tears welled in her eyes, but she turned away. "I know, and I'll always be grateful, but I can't stay." She left me there, in that sterile hospital bed, in my mother's trembling arms. And in that moment, the shattering was complete. I had thought the car had broken me, but it was Lucy's abandonment that truly crippled my soul. The first morning after Lucy left, the room felt heavier. The chair where she used to sit by the window remained empty, its silence louder than words. I stared at it for hours, waiting for her perfume to fade from the air, waiting for the faint hope of her return to die in me. My mother, Madeline, tried to fill the silence with gentle conversation. She spoke about the weather, about how the hospital food needed more seasoning, about how the nurses reminded her of her younger self. full of energy and purpose. But she knew what I was truly listening for, the sound of footsteps that would never come back. At night, I lay awake, staring at the dull ceiling tiles. My legs felt like foreign objects strapped to me, heavy and useless. Sometimes I pinched myself, as though pain might jolt them awake. But nothing happened. They were mine and not mine. And Lucy was gone. The doctors said healing wasn't just physical. It was emotional. They told me to focus on rehabilitation, to believe in possibilities. But possibilities felt like lies. The woman I had trusted with my heart had abandoned me when I needed her most. If love couldn't survive tragedy, then what was left? Madeline became my anchor. She slept in that uncomfortable chair night after night, her back stiff but her presence unwavering. She held my hand during therapy sessions, clapped when I managed to shift from bed to wheelchair, and never once looked at me with pity. Only love. Yet I could see her exhaustion. Her hands shook when she poured water. Her face aged in months what should have taken years. One evening, I told her, "Mom, you don't have to stay every night. You deserve rest. You've done enough." She looked at me with fierce tenderness. "Bright, I'm your mother. I'll stay as long as it takes. I won't leave you." Not like she did. Her words cut deep, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. Lucy's absence wasn't just a wound. It was proof that I had been disposable to her. Weeks turned into months. The hospital became a second home, its corridors echoing with footsteps and murmured conversations. Friends visited at first, bringing flowers, cards, or awkward jokes to fill the silence. But visits thinned, then stopped. People moved on. The world kept spinning, and I was left behind in the stillness of my chair. One evening, as winter settled in and frost glazed windows, Madeline wheeled me to the hospital garden. Bare branches stretched against the pale moon, and the air stung my face with cold. I stared at the stars, wondering if Lucy ever thought of me under the same sky. "I don't understand how she could just walk away," I murmured. My voice was brittle, like thin glass ready to break. Madeline placed a hand on my shoulder. "Some people only love when it's easy. True love stays when life grows hard." Her words sank into me like slow medicine. Painful, but necessary. I had to relearn everything. How to bathe, how to dress, how to maneuver in a world designed for standing men. Each task was a battle. Each failure a reminder of what I had lost. There were days I wanted to give up, to let despair pull me under. But Madeline refused to let me drown. "Bright," she would say firmly, "your life is not over. You still have breath in your lungs, fire in your heart. That car took your legs, not your soul." Still, anger lived inside me, not just at Lucy, but at myself, for sacrificing so much, for believing she would stand by me. I replayed the accident in my head again and again. What if I hadn't pushed her? What if I had saved myself instead? But regret is a cruel companion. It never offers answers, only more questions. Spring eventually came, and with it, my discharge papers. The hospital bed was replaced by a wheelchair in my mother's modest home. Our small living room became my world. The television humming, the scent of cooking wafting through the air, the clock ticking endlessly. Life outside moved on, while mine seemed paused. But one quiet night, sitting by the window and listening to the crickets sing, I made a vow. Lucy may have abandoned me, but I would not abandon myself. I would not let my story end here. Madeline found me lost in thought and asked, "What are you thinking, Bright?" I took a deep breath. "I'm thinking it's time I stop grieving what I lost and start building what I can still have." Her smile was soft, lined with pride. "That's my son." It didn't erase the heartbreak. It didn't heal the betrayal. But it was a beginning. And beginnings, I learned, are more powerful than endings. Determination came slowly, like a stubborn flame refusing to die out. I had spent too many nights staring at the ceiling, drowning in what-ifs and unanswered questions. But grief cannot be a permanent home. At some point, you must stand, even if standing means rolling forward in a chair. I began small. Each morning I set goals. Transfer from bed to the wheelchair without help, brush my teeth in under 5 minutes, fold laundry without dropping it, Achievements that once seemed insignificant became monumental victories. Madeline celebrated each one as though I had won a marathon. Her laughter filled our little house, a reminder that life could still be joyful. But surviving was not enough. I wanted to live. I wanted to prove to Lucy, to the world, and most of all to myself, that my worth hadn't been stripped away with my ability to walk. I turned to the thing I knew best, design. Before the accident, I had worked as a junior architect, sketching buildings that seemed to touch the clouds. Now, with long hours alone, I reopened my laptop and let my imagination pour out. At first, my hands trembled on the keyboard, and my focus drifted. But slowly, I found rhythm again. I sent designs to firms, applied for remote positions, and received rejection after rejection. Many didn't say it outright, but I could read between the lines. They doubted me because of my condition. Still, I pressed on. Each no only sharpened my resolve. One afternoon, while scrolling through job boards, I discovered a startup looking for freelance designers. The company was small, run by ambitious young professionals who value creativity over tradition. I submitted a portfolio I had spent sleepless nights perfecting. Days later, they called. "Your work is bold, refreshing." The manager said over Zoom, "We'd like to give you a shot." That call changed everything. Work became my therapy. I poured every ounce of myself into each design, blending steel with glass, warmth with innovation. Soon, the company began winning contracts, and my name was mentioned in industry circles. For the first time since the accident, I felt powerful, not because I had legs to stand on, but because I had a mind that created. Madeline beamed with pride. She clipped every article that mentioned me, kept them in a neat folder, and showed them off to her friends. "My bright is shining again," she would say, her eyes glistening with tears. But success wasn't just about professional triumph. It was about reclaiming my independence. I invested in a customized van, learned to drive with hand controls, and felt the thrill of freedom surge in me the first time I rolled into the driver's seat. The world stretched wide again, no longer confined to walls of my mother's house. Of course, the journey wasn't without setbacks. There were days when my body screamed with fatigue, when transferring into the chair felt like climbing a mountain. And there were nights when Lucy's ghost crept back into my dreams, reminding me of loss. But every time I faltered, Madeline's voice echoed, "Your life is not over." As the years passed, my name carried weight in architecture. Firms sought my designs, conferences invited me to speak, and magazines featured me as an example of resilience and creativity. I built not just structures on paper, but a reputation that no one could dismantle. And then, in the middle of this whirlwind of achievement, came Sarah Mitchell. We met at a professional networking event. I almost didn't go. Crowds drained me, and I hated the stares that followed my chair. But Sarah approached me with a warmth that melted my guard. She asked about my work, not my wheelchair. She laughed at my dry jokes, and when she spoke, her eyes met mine without flinching. Our connection grew quietly, steadily. She never treated me like fragile glass. If anything, she pushed me harder, to dream bigger, to live bolder. Where Lucy had seen limits, Sarah saw possibilities. One evening, as we sat in a cafe sipping coffee, she placed her hand over mine. "Bright, you've built a world out of ashes. Anyone would be proud to walk or roll beside you." For the first time in years, I allowed myself to believe in love again. Madeline welcomed Sarah like a daughter. The three of us became a family unit. Laughter echoing in the kitchen, arguments over board games, quiet prayers before bed. My mother's eyes often glistened as she watched us, no doubt relieved that her son had found both success and happiness. From the wreckage of my past, a new life had taken shape, and those scars remained. They no longer defined me. What I didn't know then was that fate was preparing me for a moment when the past and present would collide in ways I never expected. It was an ordinary evening that turned extraordinary. I had just finished a meeting with a client downtown, the kind of conversation that reminded me how far I had come since those long hospital nights. Sarah was by my side, her hand resting gently on my arm as she carried a folder I insisted I didn't need help with. We decided to stop by a new restaurant, nothing fancy, just a casual place with warm lighting and the scent of grilled steak wafting into the street. The hostess guided us to a corner table. I maneuvered my wheelchair into place, grateful for the extra space. Sarah leaned close and whispered something playful that made me laugh. It was then, as I lifted my eyes, that I saw her. Lucy. She was wearing a waitress's apron, balancing a tray of water glasses, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. For a moment, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. But no, those sharp blue eyes, that delicate jawline, I could never forget. Time had thinned her face, and there were shadows beneath her eyes. But it was Lucy Dawson. Her gaze swept across the room and landed on me. She froze. A glass wobbled dangerously on the tray before she steadied it. Color drained from her cheeks. I felt my chest tighten, not with longing, but with something far colder. Memories surged. The screech of tires, the sterile hospital air, her voice whispering that she couldn't stay. Sarah noticed my silence and touched my hand. Bright? What is it? I forced myself to breathe. It's some I used to know. Lucy approached cautiously, her steps unsteady. When she finally stood before our table, her lips parted, but no words came. Her eyes darted between me and Sarah, who was smiling politely, unaware of the storm brewing inside me. Bright, Lucy whispered at last. My name trembled on her tongue like a confession. I looked at her evenly, my expression calm, though my heart pounded. Hello, Lucy. Sarah glanced at me, then at Lucy, sensing the weight in the air. But she said nothing, giving me space. Lucy shifted, her hands gripping the tray tightly. You look different. Successful. I've read about you, seen your designs in magazines. You've done so well. Her words were syrupy, sweet with regret. I could see the flicker in her eyes, the realization of what she had thrown away. I worked hard. I replied, my tone measured, and I had people who stayed. Her eyes flickered to Sarah's hand resting on mine. The smile on Sarah's face was effortless, filled with pride and affection. In that moment, the contrast between them was blinding. Lucy's lips trembled. I made mistakes, Bright. I was young, scared. I didn't know how to handle everything. But I never stopped thinking about you. Her confession hung in the air, fragile and desperate. I studied her face. Once, those words might have shattered me. Once, I would have given anything to hear them. But now they only echoed hollow. The man she had left behind no longer existed. I had rebuilt myself brick by brick, and she was just a ghost from a life I no longer lived. Sarah, sensing the tension, finally spoke. Bright, should we order? Her voice was gentle but firm, grounding me. Yes, I said, turning back to her with a smile. Let's enjoy dinner. Lucy's eyes widened, as though she had been dismissed from a stage she no longer owned. She nodded stiffly and backed away, nearly colliding with another waiter. I watched her retreat, her shoulders slumped, her pride stripped bare. Throughout the meal, I could feel Lucy's presence hovering in the background. Every time she passed our table, she averted her gaze. Sarah carried on effortlessly, telling me about her day, her laughter filling the space that once felt hollow. At one point, when Sarah excused herself to the restroom, Lucy returned, her voice low. Bright, please, can we talk? Just once. I need you to understand. I looked at her, and for the first time, I felt nothing, no anger, no longing, just emptiness. Lucy, you made your choice, and I made mine. There's nothing left to talk about. Her eyes filled with tears. She opened her mouth, then closed it, realizing the futility. When Sarah returned, she noticed Lucy's retreating figure, but didn't ask questions. Instead, she smiled and placed a hand on my shoulder. Ready for dessert? I laughed, the sound startling even me. Yes, more than ready. That night, as Sarah and I drove home, the city lights blurring past, I realized how complete my life had become. Lucy was nothing more than a chapter closed, a lesson written in pain. And though the memory of her would always exist, it no longer held power over me. What I didn't know was that the final reckoning was still to come, when she would see not just my success, but the family I had built. The encounter at the restaurant lingered in my mind for days, though not with the weight it once might have. Instead of tormenting me, it felt like closure. Lucy had seen me again, not as the broken man she left in a hospital bed, but as Bright Morgan, the man who had risen from ashes, the man who had rebuilt his life. Weeks later, Sarah and I returned to the same restaurant. By then, her belly had begun to show, the gentle curve of pregnancy making her glow in a way that filled me with awe. She carried our future within her, and every time I looked at her, I felt the profoundness of second chances. When we walked, or in my case, rolled in through the doors, I saw Lucy again. This time, she didn't freeze. She seemed prepared. Her hair was neatly done, makeup carefully applied, as though she'd been waiting for another chance to prove something. Her eyes landed on Sarah first, and I saw the flicker of recognition. Her gaze darting to Sarah's stomach, then back to me. It was as though reality had slapped her across the face. The life she had once been promised was now lived by someone else. The hostess seated us. Sarah laughed as she tried to squeeze into the booth before realizing she couldn't, so she chose a chair beside me instead. We were a picture of ordinary happiness. Nothing glamorous, just two people deeply in love, expecting a child. And that ordinary happiness was the very thing Lucy had thrown away. She approached cautiously with a notepad. "Good evening," she said, her voice trembling despite the practiced smile. "What can I get for you both?" Sarah glanced at me, oblivious to the storm beneath the surface. "I'll have the salmon salad." "And for him?" "Steak." I finished, my eyes still on Lucy. "Medium rare." Her pen shook slightly as she scribbled. She nodded and turned quickly, but not before I caught the glassy shine of tears in her eyes. As we waited, Sarah leaned over and whispered, "She's the one, isn't she?" I blinked, startled. "What do you mean?" Sarah smiled softly. "The woman who hurt you. I don't need details, Bright. I can see it in your face. But don't worry, I'm not threatened." She placed her hand on my arm, her voice steady. "You chose me. That's all that matters." I squeezed her hand, my chest swelling with gratitude. She understood without needing the history spelled out. Dinner passed in laughter. We talked about baby names, about nursery colors, about how Madeline was preparing to spoil her grandchild. Each time Lucy walked past, she seemed smaller, diminished by the brightness of life unfolding at our table. When dessert arrived, she set down the plates with trembling hands. For a moment, she lingered, her eyes begging for acknowledgement. Finally, she whispered, "I'm sorry, Bright, for everything." I met her gaze. There was no anger in me anymore, no bitterness, only truth. "I know," I said quietly, "but sorry doesn't change the past." Sarah reached for my hand, her smile radiant, her other hand resting protectively on her stomach. Lucy's lips quivered, but she nodded and stepped back. Then, unable to bear the weight of her own shame, she turned and disappeared into the kitchen. That was the last time I saw her. As Sarah and I left the restaurant that night, the city lights shimmered against the pavement and the cool air filled my lungs. I thought about how close I had come to losing everything, not just my legs, but my spirit. Yet here I was not just surviving, but thriving. Lucy's absence had once felt like the end of my world. But now, looking at Sarah beside me, carrying the future in her womb, I realized it had only been the beginning. Betrayal had carved me hollow, but love, true love, had filled me again. And as I wheeled myself in the glow of the night, my wife at my side and our child on the way, I knew that life had given me a gift far greater than the one I had lost. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to this channel, like this video, and share to your loved ones.